So she's going to be our speaker only in song form.
That's great.
She had said. So, yeah.
Well, I started recording. I wasn't recording before, but I am now. And so
there's some feedback.
There's some feedback? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, with feedback, I think you might be able to, if you leave the meeting and come back, sometimes it helps. It's sort of like a reset.
I'd never get back on again.
Sometimes if multiple people are unmuted, that can lead to feedback sometimes.
Yeah. Did you guys see, there? It's on my YouTube channel. I'll put it in the Zoom group chat, but this is the website address for our last month's meeting. So you can go on that website and you can watch last month's meeting. And I mean, as far as I know, we're going to get the whole 2 hours this time because they gave us that announcement last time. So
Wow.
should be good. And yeah, you know, William, we talked to another admirer of yours today, and yeah, we went to Rancho Palos Verdes. This is a couple that we met at your party, and it's Ron Gibb, the former Northrop engineer, and his wife, and so and yeah, he says blown away by you. I mean, you know, writing novels in high school and college is pretty impressive. So yeah, but we talked with him a little bit, but he's quarantining. He's got the mask and everything. You know, his wife his wife talked with us a little bit. So
I just wanted to say, I think, is that Samantha Wathagawa? Is that the Samantha that's in the?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Samantha.
oh,
Hi.
So, for those of you who don't know Samantha, Samantha was the chief editor of the Shapeshifters War, which I worked on. So,
welcome, Samantha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yes,
Wow.
welcome.
So we'll see. We'll see how many show up.
Yeah.
Like watching water boil, it comes a little bit at a time, and then boom, it explodes.
Ah,
I was thinking, see, I sent the first one announcement out a couple of weeks ago, and then Van sent it out again on Thursday, and then I was thinking, you know, we should have sent it out earlier today also, because sometimes the site gets lost in your email and you have to go hunting for it to pull it up. So.
He is doing so well.
Oh, it is such a relief.
He is doing so well.
I tell you, I was kind of beyond myself wondering about how to communicate to you guys.
oh,
Just great.
So, yeah.
yeah. The club. I mean, yeah. Does anyone know if Van is going to join us?
Yes, he was supposed to.
Okay.
He did last time, and unless he's forgotten how to do it.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to forget.
Huh. But at first he didn't want to put it on his computer or whatever, but
yes.
Oh,
didn't
well.
trust
He always says no first.
Yes. Typical. Huh. Well, and
maybe he'll stay where he is if he could.
You know, that's almost like one good thing probably about the virus or whatever. He's got a bed to put his head in.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
And it's taken really good care. No one there has come down with it. It's locked up. When I deliver his mail, it's like, you know, Fort Knox or whatever.
Yeah.
Hi, Marianne. Marianne, your note's upside down. Aww. Wow. So if I disappear, it's because, well, the weather's good, at least back here. I was worried if it stormed or anything, the internet might go out. Kind of live out in the country, so
Wow.
have soybeans and sugarcane growing behind my son's little rental.
You have any horses there?
But there's a miniature horse called Royal. He's black, and
Nice.
I posted last year pictures with my granddaughters on him, riding him.
Oh.
he really, he's got a lot of spunk.
That's
He
great.
got some write-ups, so that's good.
Hey, Jerry, I think a lot of people, though, are really pressed for time these days. So maybe we should start the meeting.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and start. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Started, so.
Jerry, do you
So-
want me to, I can share the host duty with you, or we could just leave it like it is?
No, that would be great to actually, no,
Yeah.
do share. Absolutely.
Let's share.
Yes. And then so yeah, Beth, I don't know if you heard me say, but Ildy may do a song, but she can do it afterwards now.
Okay.
So until then, so I
It's
guess,
letting me, it's letting me make you the host, but not share. I can make you the host.
okay,
And
why don't
if you don't, it's okay. You don't have to. if
Well,
you,
go ahead and make me the host, and then if I scream or disappear, whatever. you
okay,
take over.
then I'll reclaim.
Jerry,
I can
Jerry, sit
reclaim
up
the host.
higher a little bit. Jerry, sit up higher a little bit.
Can
Yeah,
I
there
sit
you
up
go.
higher? No, I can't really. I
That's
had
all
to find a good place to even. Are you talking about me to sit up higher?
Yeah, we're just seeing half your chin.
Just
Oh,
tilt the
half my,
screen.
half my.
If you have a laptop, just tilt the screen.
There you go.
There, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, can you see me better?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Marianne was
Yes.
is a former member who now lives in Ohio.
Right. Hi, Marianne.
Hi,
You're
Marianne.
muted. Welcome.
Yeah, we're trying to read this upside down.
Yeah. Something.
She probably doesn't have her phone
Nah.
on.
All right. So welcome everyone that's here so far. And William, I do hope we have more joining us. If not, we're going to have you come back and do a return engagement, especially in person. And you too, Beth, when everyone's got new books. So yes, sounds good. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, William, and give us, I'm sure you've got something prepared. I wouldn't even have to, I'm sure, ask you questions or anything. So
Yeah, I've got a presentation, so I can do a share screen, and then everybody should be.
oh,
able
wow, that's super. Wow, you guys.
Well, okay, it says the host says disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay.
Oh,
So
so Jerry, you can make William the host,
Okay, do
Yeah.
that. Yes, do that.
like last month.
Sounds good. And then I'm going to go, I'm going to go ahead, everyone go ahead and mute themselves, and we'll just ask questions afterwards.
Okay. So I'm
Yeah.
going to reclaim the host, and then I'll make William the host. Let's see.
okay,
There we go. All right.
all right, thank you.
Okay. I was going to make a joke. It's not rocket science. It almost. A little
Okay,
complicated.
There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now let me actually engage the slideshow. First time doing this. Okay, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so hi everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm excited to share with you about my first full-length novel project and my journey to becoming a self-published author and how this all worked out for me, and how I know some of you have already done this before, but if you haven't, you can do it too. So a little bit about me. I've been a member of Southwest Manuscripters since I was in high school, and I've been a member of Surfriders since I was 5, so I've been at this for a little while. But I have been kind of a non-contributory member until now, so I'm excited that I actually have something to show for it. The previous book that I had self-published was The Shapeshifters War, which I will talk about in a second, but I co-authored that with other members of the Peninsula High School National English Honor Society in 2014. Samantha Wathagala, who's on the phone today, was the kind of driving force behind that project. And then my sort of other hat, when I'm not writing, my main job is I am an aerospace engineer working on spacecraft design. In October, I'm going to start my full-time job at Northrop Grumman Space Systems in Redondo Beach, which used to be TRW. That's just up the road from where we are. Some of the projects I worked on as an intern include the Space Launch System, which is this rocket down here that's going to be used for moon missions this decade as kind of a return to the Apollo level of technology. And then on the right is the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the successor to the Hubble. So those were a couple things I got to work on with my other hat on. So the beginning of my writing journey was the Shapeshifters War. So this was a fun project. Back in 2014, I was a junior in high school, and I was in the National English Honor Society chapter at Peninsula, and we decided it would be a cool idea if we all got together and wrote a fantasy novel together. And Samantha was kind of the driving force behind this project. She was the primary editor. She put most of the work into it and getting it all ready to go and kind of guiding the whole process. And so we had a meeting at the beginning where we all got together and worked out the basic plot details, who the characters were, what the setting was, where this was all going. But then after that, each of the 15 participating authors was basically given unlimited discretion with what they did with their chapter and where they took the story next. And so it was kind of each chapter was passed along to the next person. And this led to some kind of funny stuff. The only sort of agreement that we had at the beginning was that this book would contain no romance. That did not last very long. There was one that basically wrote itself and by the end had to be included. The other thing that happened was my favorite character got killed off by another author after my chapter, so I was a little put out by that. And then the really funny one was there was another author who made a character in his chapter that was clearly supposed to be him, and he was ascribing all these virtues to this character, and then subsequent chapters made this character like really fat and like all this other stuff just to kind of mess with him. So anyway, it was a fun process. Considering all of the handoffs that happened, I think that the finished product holds together remarkably well, considering the fact that it was written by a bunch of high schoolers and had kind of this unusual process behind it. My contribution was chapter 4, and then I also did the maps in this book. So that was kind of my part of it. And then Samantha did basically all the legwork getting this out. And this was published through CreateSpace, which no longer exists. It's kind of turned into KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, which is the platform I'll be talking about today. But it was done that way. And we had a lot of fun coming up with an actual, real book that you can hold in your hand. So this is a fun project and kind of my first little foray into writing. So in terms of my book is called The Seven Thunders. It's a alternate history action adventure story set in 1300s Oceania and Asia, which is kind of an unusual setting. And so I'll talk a little bit about how this all came to be. When I was little, like in elementary school, we had a game that I played with some of my friends where we had this imaginary country. And this came about because we watched, believe it or not, the Crocodile Hunter Steve Irwin movie, which came out in 2002, and that was set in Australia, and that got us all interested in Australia, and so our imaginary country was in Australia. This actually became fairly detailed over the course of us playing this game, and so a few years ago, I was thinking about this. There's something that happens every year in November called National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, and that's where you try to write a whole 50,000 word novel in a month. And I decided I was going to try to do that. And this was in 2017. And I realized, okay, there's all this kind of built-in world building and backstory with this game that we played with this imaginary country. Why don't I try to turn this into a book and see what happens? And so I got going with it. I did not finish it in November or anything close to it, but I got far enough along that I decided to keep going with the project. So anyway, there's some, you'll notice there's some biblical elements in this story because this game was something that we primarily played in Sunday school. So that was kind of built into the setting. And that's where this all came from. So anyway, the country is called WIL'IAH. It is a fictional kingdom in 13th century Australia, and it's inhabited by a bunch of different groups of people getting along together, some of which are descended from the Polynesians, some of them are descended from the lost tribes of Israel, some of them are indigenous Aboriginal Australian people, and then some of them are people from other parts of the world. And this is the good guy country, and then the bad guys are Frauzia, which is an empire inhabited by the descendants of the Philistines, which are kind of the bad guys of the Bible. So this is kind of the basic setting, and then sort of the overarching conflict that drives this story. It begins in 1279, which is the year that Kublai Khan and his Mongol armies conquered China. And this is the first time that China had actually been taken over by a foreign power in its history. So this had major shockwaves throughout the whole region. And so kind of the driving conflict of this story is how do all these other countries in the area respond to this threat? And so WIL'IAH kind of takes the high road, so to speak, and puts together an alliance of smaller countries to work together to contain the Mongols. And it's kind of like a medieval version of NATO. And then WORLOBUILDING decides the only way to beat an empire is to become an empire. And so they go on their own wave of conquest to try to become powerful themselves, but kind of in a more negative way. And they're led by WORLOBUILDING, who is the very colorful villain of the story. And I'll talk a little bit more about her later. So in terms of the writing process, there's always kind of a debate between having a really regimented outline and kind of improvising as you go along. Some people call that writing by the seat of your pants. And there's always a lot of back and forth of which is the better way. And the way I did this was, why not both? So I had kind of a general idea of where I wanted the whole story to go. I wrote like a 10 to 20 page story treatment that kind of laid out what the conflicts were, who the main characters were, how they were going to grow throughout the story, and what the major plot points were. But then I kind of had that be a flexible document as I continued through the writing process and was willing to change things as it came up. I created character worksheets for my major characters. So these worksheets kind of laid out, okay, who is this person? What are their character qualities? What do they look like? Where do they live? What are their motivations and goals? And then what are their character arcs? How are they going to grow through this story? So I did that for most of the major characters. I didn't do that for everybody in the book, but kind of the main characters I did that for. And then one kind of unusual thing I did with this is I actually wrote most of this book out of order, which was kind of an interesting process. The reason why I did this was because there were a number of sequences and scenes where I had a really clear idea for how I wanted them to be, and they really flowed out nicely. So I thought, all right, let me capture this while it's in my thought. And so I kind of wrote it all out and got it out. And then I went back in and filled in the gaps later. And there's advantages and disadvantages to doing it this way. The advantage is that if you've done this, you kind of have something that you're building towards. You know where your character is at that point in the story. And so if there's stuff that you have to build in earlier on to kind of build up to that point, you know what you have to include. So, you know, character growth and stuff like that. The disadvantage is that you may have to make some changes to the stuff that you wrote earlier on if later on your story changes. So that did happen to me a few times. There were a few things where I realized, okay, the story would be better if I took it in this direction, or I actually think this character is going to do this instead, or this battle sequence is going to move over here. And so that did necessitate some changes going back when I did my edits later on. But overall, this sort of non-chronological way of doing it worked for me. I'm not sure if I necessarily recommend it for everybody. Actually, the third book in this series, which I have the rough draft and I wrote chronologically, I didn't do the out of order stuff, and that actually worked very nicely as well. So there's not really one good way to do this, but the biggest thing is to be willing to run in a new direction if something becomes clear to you. The other thing too is that if you're planning a series like I am, there's actually a number of books that I have planned for this. It's a good idea to have at least a general idea of where the series is going in the future, because if there's stuff that you want to set up for in your earlier books, then you know about that, and that way plot points that show up in later books won't seem like they completely come out of the blue. So the other thing I did was I did a lot of illustrations throughout my writing process to help me kind of visualize the world that this was in. I actually have been doing drawing for a long time, but I primarily do transportation artwork. So I draw a lot of like ships and cars and airplanes and spacecraft and stuff like that. I had not done like character artwork until I started working on this project. So I kind of got better as I went along. And then at the end of all of this, I created this artwork piece, which I called the character montage. And this is basically all the major characters in one picture. And so I did this to kind of help me set in my thought what these characters look like, what their costumes look like, you know, what the settings look like, so that I was able to put better description into the text. So I'm not going to run through all these people because there's a lot of characters here, but on the left here is WORLOBUILDING, the main villain of the story. She's kind of a complex character because she starts out actually a little kind of sympathetic and then ends up kind of going in over her head. And her backstory is that the WORLOBUILDING Empire, which is the main bad guy country in the story, as I mentioned, is kind of a mess at the beginning of this book. It fell apart about 30 years ago before the start of the story, and it's kind of a chaotic, failed state at the moment. And so there's a secret cult within this country that is determined to restore their empire to greatness. And part of their plan is they believe that their goddess will descend back to Earth and take the form of a person to lead their empire back to greatness. And they actually have a group of people that they've identified as possible candidates for this to happen to, one of which is this person, Delilah. but she's kind of reached the end of her eligibility period. And so they're kind of threatening her, and she's realizing she's got to do something soon or she's in trouble. So she realizes, well, you know, why don't I just give them exactly what they want and pretend to be this goddess returned to Earth? And so she at first does this kind of as self-preservation, but eventually she decides that she really does want to restore her empire, and it feels kind of good to be in a position of power. And so she gradually gets more and more out of control as the story proceeds, and does increasingly crazy stuff. And then these are some of her sidekicks that show up. This is Briseis and Salome. Briseis is her initial confidant who starts out kind of uneasily going along with her plan and gradually realizes that she's been dragged in farther than she wants to be. And then Salome is an opportunist who realizes that if she hitches her wagon to Delilah's train, that she can do a lot better for herself. And then over here, we've got the good guys. This is Tamino and Avora Trivi, who are the main protagonists of the story. Tamino is actually named after the main character, or not the main character, but one of the characters from the Magic Flute opera. We heard about this when we were kids, and this name showed up as one of the characters in this imaginary country. And by the time I wrote this book, it was so ingrained that I couldn't change it. So that's this person's name. These are some of the other WIL'IAH characters who are other heroes of the story. And then in the middle, we've got Kublai Khan, the driving force behind the conflict of the story, who actually doesn't show up until pretty far into the book, but he's talked about a lot. Here's some more examples of, hold on.
William, while you're doing that, Faith had a question there in the chat window for you. I don't know if you were paying attention as you.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, for some reason I can't see the chat window running.
She asked if your religious background played a part in your development of the story. I think was.
Yeah, it did to a degree. Like I said, because this was started out as a game that we played in Sunday school, that definitely did impact the development of the story. I tried to make this a story that anybody could enjoy and appreciate, so I make an effort to not like overdo it with including the religious content. But that is an aspect of WIL'IAH's culture, and I'll talk about that a little bit later with the world building. So this is some more examples of some of the illustrations that I did. Some of these scenes actually show up in book 2, so spoiler alert, but this is some examples of kind of how I was sort of scene setting in my head and then included some of these ideas into the actual text of the book. I had a lot of fun kind of designing the different uniforms and armor that these different societies would wear. The Browsian armor down here is based on actual Philistine armor designs that were recorded on the walls of the Temple of Ramesses II at Abu Simbel, Egypt. And so I kind of based it off of that kind of stuff. I tried to include some authentic historical details. So if you are writing a book like this, which has kind of an immersive world, you have to do world building. And that's can be a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of work. I was lucky because the whole world of WIL'IAH had already kind of been pre-done through this game that we played, and so I didn't have to come up with a lot of this from scratch, but there was still a lot of stuff to think about. So really, if you're doing a fantasy story, especially if you're doing a fantasy story, or if you're doing an alternate history story with a fictional country like I did, you got to kind of work all this stuff out for your society for it to be authentic and realistic. So you have to think about stuff like languages, culture, architecture, naming conventions, like when people pick names for their kids, where they get these names from, rank structures, how your military is set up, how your politics are set up, what religion the people have, what you call people in terms of their titles, what are the gender roles, the economy, all that kind of stuff. And because this was set in a time period that people are a little less familiar with, because there's not a whole lot of popular literature and stuff set in this time period, I had to do some research to make sure I included authentic historical figures, weapons, battle tactics, ship types, stuff like that. So this is all stuff to think about when you're coming up with this kind of story. Here's an example. So because the WIL'IAHs are partially descended from Polynesian people, I based the WIL'IAH warships off of traditional Polynesian ship design. So on the left, we have the Hokulea, which is a replica Polynesian voyaging canoe that was built in the 1970s to demonstrate traditional Polynesian navigation techniques. So I based the Abaibi, which is the flagship of the WIL'IAH Navy on the right, off of this design, but I also included some other stuff. So in the story, when China falls to the Mongols, some of the Chinese engineers managed to escape and bring their technology with them to WIL'IAH. So that kind of is the origin of a lot of WIL'IAH's military equipment. So for example, up here on the right, this is a contemporary illustration of something called a fierce fire oil cabinet, which is actually a flamethrower. And this is something that the Song Dynasty military in 1200s China would use. So the WIL'IAH ships are equipped with this type of equipment. And then over here is a contemporary 13th century Song Dynasty junk, which is a type of ship used by Chinese mariners in that time period. And so this is kind of the bulk of the Mongol fleet, which the WIL'IAHs have to deal with. But some of the shipbuilding techniques, which include use of watertight compartments on these ships, are then applied to the Polynesian technology of the WIL'IAH ships. So the WIL'IAH ships are kind of a combination of several different kinds of technology. So just as an example of the world building, so as I mentioned, WIL'IAH is a blend of cultures. We have some Aboriginal Australian elements, Polynesian elements, and ancient Israelite elements that kind of develop together, but it also develops independently from Western Europe. So what was fun about that was because this is in a remote part of the world from Western Europe, a lot of the conventions that we see in like medieval European fiction don't have to apply here. So it was fun to be able to kind of play with that and make things a little different than they otherwise would have been. The government structure was interesting because, you know, some of the people in WIL'IAH are settlers and some of them are indigenous. I wanted to explore that relationship a little bit. In Western history, typically that hasn't gone too well, where the settler people have come in and kind of displaced the indigenous people, or at the very least kind of subjugated them. I wanted to explore a world where they could coexist more equally and come up with a government solution that represents everybody and you know, is a solution that works for everyone. So the way that it works in this case is the power is shared between the Crown and a representative legislature, which is composed of representatives from each of the indigenous Aboriginal Australian groups. And they still technically control the sovereignty over the land itself and basically have agreements that allow other people to live and work in that land, but they control it. So that was an interesting kind of difference from how things are often set up. The subunits of WIL'IAH are called judgeates. And then within that, there are individual states that are actually based on real Aboriginal Australian borders. The language I created, it's kind of an invented language that's based on Polynesian grammar structure and how it sounds, but it's a unique language. And so I had a lot of fun coming up with that. I came up with a lot of words and a writing system for that. Sort of a side benefit of this is I can now write myself notes that nobody else can read because I have this language. So that's been a little benefit that's come out of this. The military is kind of a traditional military. It's a combination of professional armed forces, local militia, and then individual armies of Aboriginal states. I tried to base the economy of the country off of the natural resources that were actually available in the regions that the country exists in. So for example, the western part of WIL'IAH has all the iron ore deposits, so most of the metalworking industry is in that part of the country, whereas the eastern section has more, it's more green, there's more arable land, so that's kind of the more agricultural part of the country. The naming conventions, because there's a blending of cultures, the people's given names are a combination of Aboriginal names, ancient Israelite names from the Hebrew Bible, and some Polynesian names. I had a lot of fun messing with the gender roles. So obviously in medieval European fiction, there's some pretty set kind of damsel in distress type stuff. And I didn't, you know, want to stick with that for my story. And because WIL'IAH is a non-Western country that isn't growing up with the same types of conventions, WIL'IAH has female generals, female knights, admirals. It's a very gender equal society. The sort of in-universe reason for this is that the whole country had been taken over by Frau Zia about 50 years before. And in order to throw off the imperial control, they basically had to have all hands on deck and no distinctions between, you know, different kinds of people. And so that's kind of what leads to this more egalitarian society. The religion, so this kind of talks a little bit to Faith's question. So the WIL'IAH's people is a combination of many different kinds of people. So there are many different religions coexist alongside each other within this country, but sort of the main religious background is a version of Christianity that grew up independently from the traditional Western European church. And so although it's based on the same initial texts and everything, they interpret them a little differently. The practices are a little bit different. And so I kind of tried to explore what would this look like if it grew up in isolation and didn't have some of the same political influences that it did in real life history. And then that coexists alongside traditional Aboriginal religions. I also came up with some other random culture stuff like the wedding traditions that they have and operas and things like that. And those all kind of add authentic world building details. So as an example of the map and how this all came together, on the left is something called the ATASIS map of Indigenous Australia. And
Hey,
so
William,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's interesting for people to hear how you think the Williams got to Australia as part of that religious discussion.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah, so this will be explored in a later book, but it is referenced in this one. The idea is that after the fall of the kingdom of Israel and then the subsequent fall of the kingdom of Judah to the Assyrians and the Babylonians, which happened in the BC period, it was in the 700s and 500s BC. The idea is that at this point in history, that what are called the lost tribes of Israel essentially disappear from the historical record. And so there's a lot of the ideas and theories about what happened to them. And my book is not supposed to endorse any specific theory as to what actually happened to these people, but I thought, all right, let's see what's one idea. And so the idea here basically is that a group of them managed to escape from the destruction of these countries and eventually over a period of many years gradually made their way east and eventually settled in Australia after a long journey involving both overseas and overland travel. And so that's what led to them being in this place. But unbeknownst to them, they were actually being followed and pursued by the Philistines the whole time, who themselves were also fleeing from the same Babylonian and Assyrian threat, because the Philistines also disappeared from the historical record at the same time. So I thought that kind of set up the initial conflict between these two countries, and that's how they eventually got over here. And I kind of based the idea of a long migration journey off of the fact that Polynesian societies also went on very long migration, starting in Southeast Asia and then eventually ending up as far away as places like Hawaii and Easter Island over many generations. And so the idea is that the people fleeing from Israel eventually kind of meet up with some of these Polynesian groups that are traveling and eventually sort of mingle together. And that's what leads to this development of the sort of a hybrid culture containing elements of both. So that's where that comes from. And then on the left, you can see this map here shows all the boundaries of individual indigenous groups in Australia. There's a lot of them, as you can see. Basically, these are all individual languages, many of which are related to each other. And because WIL'IAH is a voluntary association of a bunch of these individual groups, I thought that the borders needed to actually reflect these real borders. So you can see how the lines between these little groups turn into the actual country borders in my story. And that's also used to create the individual province borders within WIL'IAH. I also tried to make the place names authentic, so the judgate names and the city names in many cases are actual Aboriginal words for those regions. However, WIL'IAH is a little different because WIL'IAH is a repressive imperial society. They do not include those kinds of names in their place names. And a source of the tension between the two countries is WIL'IAH is, of course, trying to liberate these groups down here, which are under the imperial control of WIL'IAH. So that leads to some of the conflict in the story. So that's how I came up with the boundaries and the regions in the book. So by the end of the initial writing process, my book was way too big. The Seven Thunders was about 172,000 words, and it turned it into about 750 or so pages of double-spaced 12-point font. Now, it's not super unusual for books to be that long in the fantasy genre. There are some that are even longer. So, for example, the Game of Thrones books range from 200,000 words to 400,000 words. But those are all from established authors with loyal followings who are willing to sit through a huge book from this person. And I'm not at that point. So I realized that I really couldn't make a book to be that big as a first effort. And so I tried to think about, okay, what can I get rid of? Maybe there's some content that doesn't need to be here or that's redundant. And so I tried to get rid of some stuff, but eventually what I was left with was all stuff that I thought was necessary to tell the full story. But I did realize that there was kind of a natural stopping point halfway through the book. And so I realized, okay, this maybe could be 2 books. And so that's what ended up happening. So book 1 kept the title and became The Seven Thunders, and that's about 97,000 words in its final form. And then book 2, A Lion Roareth, is still kind of in the initial editing stages, and it's at about 91,000 words right now. And that works out to about 400 or so pages each, which is a little bit more manageable for a beginning reader. It's still, you know, on a larger end for a novel, so it's a respectable size for the book, but it's not as overwhelming as it otherwise would be. There's some advantages to doing it this way. Each book has a lower printing and retail price, so it's more affordable for people. There's a lot less work to release the first book because there's less content to go through and edit. But then the disadvantage to this is that you have multiple books which you make, and there's work that is needed to make sure that each half of the book works as a standalone story, as opposed to just kind of picking up where the last one left off. So that's one of the things I'm working on in book 2, is making sure if someone comes in off the street not having read book 1, is this still something they can understand and wrap their head around. So that does require some extra work. So in terms of my revising process, everybody approaches this a little bit differently. Obviously, the best way to go about this is to hire a professional editor and a proofreader to work with you. I didn't really have a budget for that. So what I did was kind of a multi-step editing process. My first round was to read through myself and try to catch as I could, like typos and capitalization and grammar and that kind of thing. It's always a good idea to give yourself some time between when you do the writing and do the editing to give yourself some distance from it. It can be a little hard to be objective if you try to figure it out right away. I think that someone else is unmuted, so it might be a good idea to all. And, the next thing that I did was an alpha reader, and that is one sympathetic reader to kind of give you some initial feedback on your work. And so that's what I did. And so that was kind of the initial first step that I took. And then after that, you do a second round of edits to incorporate the alpha reader's feedback. And so that was my process. And then the third step was to do the beta readers. So the beta readers were basically a small group of people that you can use to evaluate your work and get some initial feedback from. And so I had a few people in this group help me out as beta readers, so I appreciate them. And it's good to get kind of a diverse group of beta readers so you can get different perspectives on your story. It's always good to see how, you know, different kinds of people react to your story and what they get out of it. Another advantage to that is you also want to make sure that nothing in your book is accidentally offensive to somebody. I did a lot of work to try to make sure that wouldn't happen, but you never know. So it's a good idea to get some additional help with that. And then my third round was to incorporate the beta reader feedback. And then the fourth round was the final finishing touches on the story after all of that work. So once you've done that, then you can create a finished product. So that's the first step, is to get your book done, and then the second step is to actually create a published, you know, product that includes, you know, book design and layout and all of that stuff. These are some pictures that people have sent me of their copies, which is always fun to see, you know, what people see when they get their package in the mail. And so I'll talk a little bit now about the process of self-publishing and taking it from a manuscript to an actual book. So if you're working in KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, that's probably at this point the easiest way to do it. There's a lot of different services that are out there that you can use. Some of them are what are called vanity presses, which will print your book for you, but they're usually a lot more expensive. There's other ways to do this too, like Lightning Source and Lulu and things like that. Those are all viable options, but I found that KDP is generally the easiest to use. The nice thing about it is it's a print-on-demand service, kind of like CreateSpace was, where basically you don't have to buy a set number of books to begin with. They are printed off as they're ordered, so you don't end up with like a huge inventory that you have to store and then try to sell. So that's all stuff to bear in mind. So I use KDP, so this is kind of the process I will talk about today. If you're doing this, there's a little secret in the industry that a lot of people don't know about. And the convention is that nonfiction books are on white paper and fiction books are on cream paper. And you get to choose when you're doing your KDP setup which type of paper you're going to use to make sure you follow this convention. Most of the general public probably isn't aware of this, but they know enough about it to be able to tell when something's wrong. And so if they're reading a fiction book that is in white paper, they won't really realize that's what the problem is, but something will seem off. And so that's just, you know, something to bear in mind. The KDP templates that you can download off of their website are already divided into chapters that are each separate sections. And so that kind of makes your formatting work a lot easier. But you also have to make sure that you try to preserve that formatting as much as possible, because if you accidentally mess with any of it, it can cause you a lot of grief later. So try not to make too many changes to that. A way to do that is to work in what's called review mode, which is showing all the different editing marks. And that can be a little hard to deal with in terms of reading your book because it's got all this extra extraneous stuff, but it really helps you see where the section breaks are, where the paragraph indentations are, and it helps you make sure that that all stays consistent. One thing too that Mom and I are working on, Mom a couple years ago put out a book called How to Self-Publish Your Book, or How to Self-Publish Your Book in 10 Easy Steps. And it kind of walked through this whole KDP process. But of course, they're always constantly changing stuff. And so Mom and I are now working on a 3rd edition based on some of the stuff that I learned during this process. We're going to get that released fairly soon. And if any of you have a copy of the previous edition of the book, let us know, and we will send you a PDF of the new one for free, because we don't want you to have to keep buying the book over and over again just because KDP changed it. So that's kind of on the honor system, but let us know if that's something that you would like. But we'll talk a little bit about this stuff today. As I said, try not to mess with the KDP sections. One little thing that I had some trouble with is, for some reason, the KDP template that I had didn't have uniform text justification and indentations. There were some chapters that were slightly different from other ones, so make sure that you watch that. One of my readers actually did catch for me that one couple pages in my book actually had slightly different indentation than the others. So things like that can happen. It's hard to manually check it, but you do have to do that. And then another thing to do is to try several different combinations of font sizes and line spacing to find one that you're comfortable with. This can really, it's up to you, it's your decision, but really the best thing to do is make it as legible as possible. One tip is to try to print out a few different combinations and see with one uniform block of text that's the same passage from your book, and try to see which one looks best to you. For my book, I actually just used 12-point font with single spacing for the final product, which is actually not what I was expecting to do, but that actually did look the best for me. So that's something that you should try to do. I'll talk about the fonts a little bit in a minute here. Another thing you have to do is choose your trim size. There are a number of different standard trim sizes for books. There's not really one uniform trim size, and that refers to the physical dimensions of your book. Even within the same genre, it's not always the same. So what I would recommend to do if you're trying to pick a trim size, look at a bunch of different books in your genre, measure them, find a size that looks right to you, that fits well in your hand. And you can also do the same thing that I talked about on the previous slide, where you can print off different combinations of that using different KDP templates and see which size you like the best. KDP offers a lot of different trim size options. Please try to stick, if you're using KDP, to one of the ones that they offer. It will make your life a lot easier. The size that I ended up using was 5 1/4 by 8 inches. That worked out pretty well for me. But nonfiction books, if you're doing a nonfiction book, tend to be a little bit larger physically because they include more pictures and graphics and things like that. So it really kind of depends on your genre. And next thing you got to think about is your fonts. I'm a little bit of a font nerd, so I put a lot of thought into this, but it's actually kind of a fun activity. So for your main body, it's a good idea to try to pick fonts that are legible for extended reading periods, but aren't like super common. And the advantage to that is that it won't look unprofessional because it won't be something that everybody's already seen before, but you want it to be something that's legible. So one trick in the industry that I have learned is that sans serif font. So for example, the font that's on my screen right now is a sans serif font. It means it does not have the kind of fancy loops and stuff on the ends of the letters. They are actually not as legible for extended reading as a serif font. They generally look cleaner and more modern, but studies have shown that for extended reading periods, it's better to pick a serif font. The most common serif font is Times New Roman, but everybody has seen Times New Roman and everybody knows how to recognize it, and it's one of the word defaults. So a good idea is to not pick one that's one of the word defaults and pick one that's a little more unusual. So I use Garamond for my book. Some of the other popular choices are Palatino and Baskerville. Those are other good options for serif fonts. When you come up with your cover and your chapter headings, though, you can have a little bit more fun with it and pick different fonts that kind of add some atmosphere to your book and match the genre of your book. You want your font to match, you know, kind of the feeling that you want your readers to have. So for example, if you're doing an action book, you probably want a more kind of block-like font like this one. If you're doing a romance book, you probably don't want like an action or a gritty font, and you'll probably go more with like a kind of a script or a calligraphy type thing. So that's stuff that you just have to think about. Word has a limited selection of fonts. There's only so many that are in there. And like I said, many of them are ones that people will already seen. So it's a good idea to kind of look beyond Word and try to find fonts online that, you know, kind of match what you're looking for. But you got to be a little careful because you have to make sure that you have the right permissions to use a font commercially. Fonts are copyrighted. They belong to the designer of the font. And you got to make sure that you have the right permissions and attributions and licenses. So if you're looking for a font online, typically all of the Google fonts are open use, so you can use any of those. If you find a font that you really like, look it up and make sure that it has a unlimited open use license, or if it doesn't, that you purchase a license for it. That's actually what I ended up doing for one of the fonts that I used. And then you do have it in writing that you're able to use the font for unlimited commercial purposes. But basically, you can't just go download a font and then use it. It's not that simple, unfortunately. So that's just something to bear in mind when you are doing this work. So my fonts, for example, the titles and chapter headings were this font called American Captain. I got a license for this. The unlimited license was about $25, but I can use it in perpetuity. And it actually came with 6 different font families included in the package. So it actually seemed like a fairly good deal to me. The subtitles for my chapter headings, I used this American Captain Eternal, which was kind of one of the bonus things that came with this one. And it's basically a condensed version of it, but it actually works really well because it's all a consistent font family. And then this font is I used for some of the subtitles and the raised initials, which I'll talk about later. This is Matura MP Script Capitals, which is included in Word. So it is one of the basic Word ones, but it's less commonly used, and it kind of had that adventure look to it. So that's why I picked it. And then my main body was Garamond. Generally, if your font is included in Word or in the Microsoft package, it's fair use. So you don't have to worry about getting a license for something that's included already in Word. So for jazzing up the chapter headings, I did some work to kind of make them look interesting. So I used American Captain for the title number. I used American Captain Eternal for the subtitle heading. This star is the emblem of WIL'IAH, so I kind of used this as kind of a little jewelry for each chapter heading. Anytime there was a change in location in the story, I used this location tag, which would basically tell everybody where they were and when. And then down here, this is what's called a raised initial. So you'll see this a lot in books where the initial letter in a chapter is a little bit bigger or more ornate than the others. And you can do this, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than you think. There's another version called dropped initials, where instead of sort of raising over the rest of the letters, it's embedded within the text. You can do that too. The way to do this is to use word art feature within a Word manuscript. So you can't actually just type a bigger, different letter because that will mess up your line spacing. What you have to do is you have to create a word art image. So this is actually an image, and there's some tutorials that you can find online that will help you do that. But basically, you have to paste this in manually. I have 70 chapters in my book, so this was a lot of manual work to get these in here, but I think it paid off because it looks kind of cool, and it definitely makes it seem like a more professional product than it would be otherwise. So if your book has maps like mine did, there's a few different ways you can do it. When I did the maps for the Shapeshifters War, I drew them by hand. That worked out okay, although it was, you could kind of tell it was a hand-drawn one, so I wanted one that was a little more professional looking this time around, and my skills have improved since I was in high school, so I was able to do that. There's a few different ways you can do this. I actually just did my maps in PowerPoint, which isn't something that you would necessarily think to do, but you can do it that way. PowerPoint has a feature where you can do freeform shapes, where you basically place little dots that mark out the edges of your shape, and then it creates it for you. So you can trace over an existing map using those features. That's how I made my maps. And then you can fill them in with different colors, textures. You can even like fill them with a picture. You can make them semi-transparent or completely transparent. There's a lot of different things you can do. So that's how I created the maps. And I have two maps in my book. I have a map of Australia, the kind of alternate history version that I have in my story. And then I also have a map of Asia in the same time period. This map is really not an alternate history map. This is basically Asia as it was in 1290. I didn't really change anything, but I wanted to include a map that kind of showed everybody all the locations in Asia that were being talked about in the book so that they could see what was going on. So I essentially traced this over an existing map, but included more details than that map had. So you can kind of control this yourself, and you can use, you know, kind of fun fonts. In this case, I did use a sans serif font because it was the clearest for the size of image. And because KDP books mostly are black and white, you can get a color KDP book, but that makes the printing a lot more expensive. I tried to keep to a grayscale format for my maps. And the next step, once you've created all this stuff, is to get your ISBNs, which are your International Standard Book Numbers. If you're working through KDP, KDP will give you a free one, but that's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing because whoever owns the ISBN is technically the publisher of the book and has rights to the book. So if Amazon gives you an ISBN, they actually still own that ISBN, and therefore they then have some control over your book. So it's better to get your own ISBN. Unfortunately, there's only one place where you can buy them in America, which is this website called Bowker. I'm not sure how they got away with this. It seems like an illegal monopoly, but they're the only place where you can buy an ISBN. So you have to get them from their website. They have a lot of different packages and bundles which offer different numbers of ISBNs. And basically, the more that you buy at a time, the less it is per number. So my recommendation, if you're looking to publish more than one book, would be the 10-number bundle. It's $295, which is kind of a lot, but that's a lot less per number than it would be if you individually bought 10 numbers. And if you're doing like a short series, that's usually enough. One thing to remember is that if you are publishing multiple formats of your book, like a paperback, an ebook, and a hardcover, each one requires a separate ISBN. So, you know, if you're doing a book with 3 different editions, you're going to need 3 ISBNs for that. And that's why these bundles tend to be a good deal. The next bundle up from 10 is the 50-number bundle. So if you're really planning to put out a lot of books, that might be a good option for you, but that's kind of overkill for me at this point. You can assign the numbers however you want. They don't expire, which is nice. Bowker will try to sell you a bunch of other stuff too. And the only thing you need to buy from them is the ISBN itself. They will try to sell you a barcode, which is, you know, goes on the back of the book, and they will charge you $25 for the barcode. Do not buy it from them. You can get a free barcode from other places once you have an ISBN input, and I'll talk about where you can get that a little bit later. So that's something to bear in mind. The next step is to get a Library of Congress control number, or LCCN. This is not absolutely necessary to get, but it is a good thing to have because you do need one if you want your book to be carried in libraries. And it's also kind of cool to be able to say that your book is registered with the Library of Congress. It's a free program, so you do not have to pay them to get a number. The other nice thing is you only need one LCCN to cover all of the formats of your book. So you don't need multiple ones like the ISBNs. You go to the Library of Congress control number website, you then just create an account, file a request, and then they will send you a number in your email and tell you exactly how they want you to put it in your book. If any of your biographical or book information changes, like if you change your subtitle, for example, you have to file a change request within 60 days of publication, and then they will change it for you. And you put that information on your colophon page, which is that kind of the page behind your title page that includes the copyright date and all that stuff. Another thing you should do if you're a new author is create a website for yourself. And I ended up doing this. This is something that may be a little daunting to some people, but it's not actually as bad as it could be. You do not have to be able to code to create a website anymore. There are a number of services out there that offer website builders where you kind of put it together like you put together a document. The 3 leading ones right now are WordPress, HostGator, and Constant Contact. Constant Contact is better known for email marketing, but they also offer a website development service. WordPress offers the most options and is the most customizable, but it's a little bit more expensive. I used HostGator because it was the cheapest. It's under $4 a month to maintain my website and my domain, and it gave me all the features that I needed. So that's what I ended up doing. You can include links to your book's page on Amazon or other places where you can buy it, updates, a contact box, a newsletter sign up, and a blog. So my blog, I put up what I call production notes, so sort of little behind the scenes insights and bonus illustrations, especially since Although my book does include 6 of the illustrations that I showed at the beginning, they are black and white in the book itself. So I include the color versions on the website so people can see them. And it's an effective tool that you can do without a whole lot of extra work. And once you've created your website, it's not a whole lot of work to maintain it. This is kind of what the landing page of my website looks like. So I have a big banner which people can use to navigate to my Amazon page. And then I also have all this other stuff with different pages. The other thing you can do is create an imprint. So this is a great way to kind of set your book apart from other self-published books. There are a lot of tells that give away that your book is a self-published book if you don't know how to avoid them, and one of them is not including an imprint. So you'll notice that most books published by a traditional publisher will include a publisher logo somewhere on the book, usually on the spine and on the back cover. You can do that too, because you can create your own imprint and then a logo for that imprint and put it on your book. You can register your imprint with Bowker when you assign your ISBN, and then you can list that as the publisher on KDP, and it will actually show up as that being the publisher on your Amazon page, and you can put that logo on your book. And so that's another way to make your book look more professional. When you're trying to come up with a name for your imprint, it's a good idea to not make it your name, anything related to your name, or anything related to something in your book. And because that's, one way for people to tell. So what I did was I actually picked the name Zena Books, which came from the name of a fort that some friends and I made when we were in elementary school that was unrelated to the WIL'IAH series. The logo that I cooked up was based off of the flag that was the flag for that region in elementary school that we created. So that's where I came up with this stuff from. I put this on my back cover and on my spine, and it looks really, pretty real. So that's cool. That's an easy thing for you to do. Now, speaking of covers, there are a lot of different ways to do this, of varying levels of difficulty. So if you hire an artist to make your cover, many people do this, and they often turn out looking really good. And that also helps out, artists who are looking for work. But that can be kind of expensive, and the artist will never be inside your head, so they will never know exactly, what you want it to look like or how you imagine something looking in your book. So if you have some artistic ability, it's maybe better and certainly cheaper to do it yourself. There are a couple of different ways to do this. KDP offers a built-in cover creator in their platform. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you a whole lot of options and is a little limited in what it's able to do. So if you really are kind of trying to do this quickly, then that's a good way to do it, but it doesn't always yield the best results. Notably, it does not include a place for you to put your imprint logo, for example. So that's the stuff to bear in mind. The other way to do it is to do it completely by yourself. And there's a really great website called bookowl.com, which has kind of started to replicate some of the features that went away when CreateSpace went over to KDP. So if you go to their website, they have a built-in cover template creator. So you enter in the information of your trim size and how many pages your book is, and then it will create an auto-generated PDF or JPEG template, which it will email to you. And then that actually tells you exactly the size of your cover, where all the live area is, basically where you can put content, and where your barcode will go. They will also generate free barcodes for you based on your ISBN number. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. The great thing, it's totally free. They do accept donations. So when I used their services, I did leave them a small donation kind of just to help them along. But once you get that template, you can create your own cover in PowerPoint, Photoshop, InDesign, or another artistic platform. InDesign and Photoshop are kind of more professional design softwares. They have a pretty steep learning curve and are kind of expensive, but are a lot more powerful in terms of what you're able to do. So Ellen He she was one of the authors of Shapeshifters War. She did our Shapeshifters War cover in Photoshop, for example. I don't know how to use Photoshop or InDesign, and I don't have it on my computer, so I just use PowerPoint for my cover. Again, not something you would necessarily think to do, but there are a lot of shapes in PowerPoint that you can use to create somewhat convincing covers. Once you've done that, adjust your computer settings so that PowerPoint can output high-resolution JPEG images. There's a few different ways to do that. But KDP actually does accept your PDF, your cover as a PDF. So that is probably the better way to do it, and it's a little bit easier. You can just literally save a PowerPoint presentation as a PDF. The way that this works is you create a new PowerPoint presentation, you make this one slide, you make the slide, you adjust the size of the slide so it's actually the size of your cover, and then you can input all of the content. One little tip though is that if you're doing yourself like this, you have to wait until you finalize your page count to make the cover, because that will affect how wide the spine is. So that's just stuff to think about. Some tips for cover design. I mentioned you can hire an illustrator, but just in general, look at other covers in your genre, see what kind of the trends are these days. When I did my research, I noticed that kind of graphical covers, more than super complicated paintings and images and stuff, are in these days. Kind of more sort of simplistic or minimalist, strong contrasting colors and solid colors seem to be pretty popular, and those are also a lot easier to execute than a really complicated cover illustration. So that's something to think about. Try to pick striking colors. Another thing too is design your cover so it looks good as a thumbnail, because these days people do a lot of their book shopping online and they only see a little teeny weeny, like postage stamp size picture of your cover, and oftentimes that's what they use to make their decisions for purchasing. So make sure that your cover is legible at that size and is still, you know, attention grabbing with what you have to work with online. This is what my cover ended up looking like. So I went with kind of a strong contrasting color dynamic and silhouettes instead of really complicated images. I actually, this is kind of the outline of Krause Delilah in her infamous Cobra outfit that she wears as the Empress. And I based this off of an actual illustration that I'd done, but I kind of turned it into a silhouette using PowerPoint shapes. Same thing here. These are two of the different ship types that are involved in the book, kind of showing the conflict between the Mongol Navy and the WIL'IAH Navy. So I was able to put in some details into the cover without making it like super complicated and really hard for me to deal with. And this, when it's shrunken down to a small size, is still fairly legible. You can read the main title and everything like that. The back cover should have a short description of your book's conflict. You can then reuse this for your Amazon description, for example. And then you can see where I put my little imprint logo on the spine and in the back cover. Another tip that I learned is that it's a good idea to have a solid color transition between the front cover to the spine to the back cover, because you're never sure exactly where KDP will end up printing your spine content, and it might not be exactly in the middle of the spine. And so if the color kind of blends in between, it's a little harder for people to tell if it's not printed exactly the way it was supposed to be. So that's just something to think about. Your barcode goes here. The barcode actually includes two parts. This was an earlier version of my barcode. So the main barcode has another section over to the right. This part here is just the ISBN information. And then the secondary barcode on the right is the price information. My recommendation, and you can enter this into BookOwl when you get your barcode, is to basically not specify a price, because that way you can change it if you need to later. If you want to do like a special sale price during like a holiday season or something, you can do that. It gives you a little bit more flexibility down the line. So that's what I ended up coming up with for my cover. Next thing you got to do if you want to release an ebook is transition it to an ebook version. This was a little bit harder than I expected it to be for me, because Amazon has their own proprietary font they use for Kindle ebooks, and it will automatically change your manuscript into that font if you upload it as a Word document. And then you have basically no control over that, and it could mess up your pagination. So that's something to be aware of. Make sure that you look at the previewer several times to make sure that everything shows up where you want it once that happens. There is another way to do that, which I'll talk about in a second, though, which may help you avoid that. Kindle does not accept PDFs. Unfortunately, but it does accept Word manuscripts. It's a little bit better. As I mentioned, it does sometimes mess it up with this pagination thing. But if you've already put all the work into formatting your manuscript in Word, probably best to just go along with the Word and kind of grit your teeth. The other option, though, is KDP does have an actual ebook creation software which you can download. So if you're starting from scratch and you want to make your book ebook compatible, it's probably a good idea to do it with that software. I have not used it yet, but I think that it is an easier transition to a Kindle version if you do it that way. The sort of bonus to this, though, is that Kindle does support color images, and you can put in as many as you want. So there's a little bit of content advantage over a paperback book from that perspective. So once you've done all this, you get your proof copy in the mail, which is pretty exciting, because for the first time you get to see like an actual physical copy of your book in its almost final form. The only disadvantage is that it does print this nice ribbon across the top that says "not for resale," so you can't use this for anything else except as a proof copy. One thing to be aware of, this happened to us both with the Shapeshifters War and also with my book, is that on the proof copy, for some reason, everything got shifted over slightly. So the front cover was shifted slightly to the right, and the spine was shifted to the right as well slightly. And then when we got the actual production version, that went away without us changing anything. So if that happens to you with the proof copy, you know, don't be too alarmed. It's not that big of a deal. It will probably go away on its own. Once you've launched your book, you can kind of track your progress through Author Central on Amazon and also through your KDP account. And it will give you a graph of your book ranking over time, which will probably fluctuate greatly, as mine did. What I did for my launch was I had a discounted price for the first few days to kind of get the ball rolling. And so I had pretty strong sales for my first few days. I actually was the #1 new release in medieval historical fiction, and was a bestseller in both that category and alternate history fiction, which was pretty exciting. And you can say that you're a bestseller if your book is within the top 100 books in that category. I peaked at #5 in medieval historical fiction, which is pretty fun. So that kind of is this part here. Then you start to fall off, and then you really start to fall off. But what's interesting is even one sale can cause you to jump way back up in your rankings. And that's what happened in both of these cases. So it's good to just watch it and see where it is. Unfortunately, this timestamp is only taken each day. It's not like an hourly thing. So you might be even higher, like during the middle of the day. By the time they take the timestamp, you're back down again. So especially when you're doing if you're doing a bestseller campaign, which is where you're like really kind of trying to boost your sales through like discounts and stuff, it's a good idea to check it pretty regularly. They say they update it every hour, but it's not always every hour. And then you can also, Nielsen will tell you where your book has been sold physically, which is kind of fun to be able to see where your copies were sold. This takes a long time to update. It's like 2 to 3 weeks between when a sale is reported and when it actually shows up on this map. So that can be a little hard to wait. But as you can see, most of my sales came from around here in the LA region, but not all of them. I did have books sold in other parts of the country as well. So it's kind of fun to be able to see where that happens. So for me, I guess what's next? So book 2, A Lion Roareth, is in the alpha editing stage. As I mentioned, it's like 92,000 words right now. And that's basically picking up right where book 1 left off. Book 1 ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and so it kind of leads right into book 2. So I'm hoping to get that out by Christmas. That's kind of my internal deadline, so it can be available for the holiday season. And then book 3, The Ranger of WIL'IAH, I have the rough draft complete. It's about 60,000 words, so it's a little bit shorter than the others. It's still kind of in the novel length territory, but it's less involved. And this one, I just kind of did something completely different. So it's still within the same series, same setting, includes a lot of the same characters, but it's set about 20 years later, and it's actually a Western. So it's set in kind of a remote frontier part of WIL'IAH, and it deals with some of the aftermath of the main conflict that is explored in the first 2 books. And it's a little bit more of an intimate setting. There's a few main characters as opposed to a more sprawling, epic scale setting of the first 2 books. And so it's kind of a fun change of pace. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I'm looking forward to getting that out too, but I'm going to focus on getting book 2 released first before I go back to editing book 3. I have detailed story treatments for book 4, which is going to be called Hands Across the Desert, and book 5, which is going to be called A Higher Way. Those 2 will kind of complete the initial cycle of stories set in the Middle Ages. But as part of the sort of extensive world building activities that we did when we were playing this game with WIL'IAH, I actually have a pretty detailed fictional history of this country going all the way through World War II. And so I've been thinking about what are some other stories that we can explore in this universe. And so after this, my sort of next thing on the horizon is to explore the World War II era and how this fictional country responds to those events. WIL'IAH ends up joining the Allies and participating in those efforts. So it's going to be interesting for me to explore that. I've done a lot of kind of pre-writing of developing the naval ships and the airplanes and stuff that WIL'IAH has during this era, and that's been a lot of fun to put together. So that's coming at some point in the future. I'm not sure exactly when, but I am thinking about that. And then I have an idea I've been kicking around to do something called an illuminated edition, which is basically maybe a little bit higher production values, including more of the full color illustrations that I did. At the moment, though, that would probably be a more expensive product, and I don't really think there's a market for that. So I'm not really actively pursuing that at the moment, but that may happen at some point in the future. So that's kind of where I am with this particular book project. I don't want to take too much of your guys' time, so I'm happy to take any questions if you have them. Otherwise, thank you for having me and for being such a support system for me through my writing journey. And I'm going to make Dan the facilitator again. Let me see how I can do that.
Great job, William. Thank you
Hey.
so much. I had no idea you were going to do this amazing presentation. This is really impressive. Wow. I can't wait to read it. Can't wait to get home and get my edition.
Yep, it's on, yeah, it's on the way.
Anybody
Okay.
have any questions for? So I don't know if you follow the chat, but we see it as a TV series, a la Game of Thrones. And
Yeah,
so much
often
potential.
when people ask me what it's like, I kind of pitch it as a more family-friendly alternative to Game of Thrones because it's kind of the same genre, but it's a lot less gritty than we see in that show. Yeah, Faith.
Good.
I wanted to give you a show and tell that I forgot to show you when you gave me my book.
Oh, cool.
And this is an amazing
Oh.
piece of art from Shanghai. And it was basically, these ships were in the same place where the World War II ships were in the Yangtze River that I'm going to talk to you about down the river and tell you about the ships that were there that were amazing.
Yeah,
that helped,
thank you. It's
help
very similar to the
liberate that.
books that are in my book, so that's cool. to
Yeah.
see that.
William, I was wondering if you had any connection with, you're familiar with Thor Heyerdahl, right?
Yeah.
With his Ra and the Kon-Tiki. Mostly the Ra, though, I think that applies to the Lost Tribes of Israel. And
Yeah. I have one of his books. I haven't read it yet, but a lot of the maritime technology in my story is inspired by a lot of the reconstruction efforts that he did, and also the Polynesian Navigation Society did, where they kind of looked at maybe these ancient civilizations were able to travel a lot farther than people give them credit for,
Yes.
using the technology that they had. So yeah, that does play into it.
because he does have, I don't know, documentaries, I guess, basically, of his trips also. So
Yeah,
that's what, as you were talking, that's what I was reminded of.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. This is,
Yeah, Faith, you have another question?
Yes, two questions. One, will you get this copies to Australia? And has Mark Fine seen your book yet?
Okay, good questions. The book is available for sale internationally, so I have enabled expanded distribution. So I think if somebody in Australia were to order one, they could get it. I don't know of any specific connection with that yet, and I don't think Mark has seen it yet. But I went to preschool with Mark's son, so we go way back.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think he will see it at some point. Yeah.
unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, guys.
Okay.
How do I do that?
Okay, yeah. I unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously, congratulations on your project for books. If I ever write another book, I definitely want you doing my research for me. Because that's incredible. I'm amazed that you not only illustrated your characters, but you illustrated the costumes, the flags, the works. I mean, really an incredible job.
Thank you. That was honestly one of the most fun parts, was figuring out kind of what everything was going to look like, and the architecture styles and the costumes and stuff. And
Oh.
I tried to make the armor designs realistic for the time period. The WIL'IAH armor
And you
kind
did.
of based on Chinese armor from that time period, and I tried to make it more sort of breathable because they were in a desert environment. So it was a lot of fun.
A beautiful job of world building.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it is so visual. Even from what I read, it's just so visual to you.
Thanks. Yeah, Dan?
Oh, well, William, I look forward to reading your book very much. I'm a fan of alternative history, and I'm just wondering if, well, I mean, with this book, you have an indigenous people that you don't really get to see their progression in real life, and I'm wondering if, well, you don't have to answer this. I'll have to probably read your future books, but what happens when, do you have a future plan where the Europeans come and colonize Australia, or do I just have to wait for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is going to be explored extensively in future books. So one of the themes of the later on in the World War II series, in the story leading up to it, is going to be kind of the struggle between isolationism and within WIL'IAH, because obviously they're kind of in an out of the way part of the world. Australia was one of the last parts of the world to be reached by European explorers. They actually didn't find it until the late 1600s. And so there's going to be some level of exploration of this. But what ends up happening later on is WIL'IAH kind of assumes the mantle of trying to protect other indigenous people from European imperialism. But because they're one country, there's only so much they can do. And so that plays into kind of the conflict within the story of some of the people in the country are saying, hey, we should just protect, keep ourselves safe. Whereas others like, no, we need to go protect everybody else. And so that kind of leads to some internal debate. What will happen is in a future book, the British will create something called the British Australia Company. Is kind of like an equivalent of what they did in India. And so they try to sort of divide and conquer and take over WIL'IAH. It doesn't end up working, but it gets kind of close. And so later on, what will lead to some really interesting stuff in the World War II series is, although WIL'IAH's primary goal is to beat the Axis, their secondary goal is, once that's done, is to decolonize all these parts that Europe has taken over. And so they're fighting alongside, for example, the British and the Dutch colonial empires, basically with the common goal of defeating the Japanese and the Germans, but at the same time, like, yeah, we're going to help you out to fight these guys, but once we're done, you got to get out of here, basically. And so that's going to lead to some kind of interesting tension within the Allies side in the World War II trilogy. So anyway, that is definitely, great question. That is definitely ground that's going to be explored later. There's also going to be a few little changes to the timeline, like the WIL'IAH timeline. Hawaii stays independent with William protection, and so that leads to some changes in how World War II plays out, stuff like that. So all stuff that has been thought about.
Okay, thank you, William. I really look forward to reading it. So
Yes.
thank you.
Wow. Ildi has a question.
Yeah, it looks like
Ildi, unmute yourself.
yeah, Ildi.
Ildi, unmute yourself.
Dan, is there a way to unmute Ildi?
Ildi, we're not hearing you, hon.
There we go.
Oh,
There's,
Can you guys hear me?
yes, now we hear.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for writing this book, because it's really very. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but I think someone else is also unmuted. So yeah.
Unmute?
yeah, go ahead, Ildi.
She's muted again. Yeah, she's still.
No,
muted.
she has to unmute. Yeah, I asked her to unmute.
I think what happened was two people did it at the same time or something.
Yeah.
Are you talking about me?
No, it was.
No, I just asked everybody to unmute. To everybody should be muted except for Ildi. That's what I'm trying to.
I'll mute myself.
That's what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, it looks like I can only ask her to unmute. And
Okay.
Ildi, can you unmute yourself, please? Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, Elder, we missed what you said. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so you guys can hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So I don't know if you heard what I said, that I really, really love it because it's so visual. I was in the battle. I felt, oh, I saw, I smelled. I mean, it was just unbelievable experience. I had very little time because I'm on a lot of shit right now. Excuse me. But I only wanted to take a look, and I couldn't put the book down. I just had to read it, keep reading. So it's really great, fantastic. I'm so proud of you, William. We are all. And so also your vocabulary is very rich, very, very beautiful. And I love your adjectives. They tell me sometimes to cut them down, but I think your adjectives is really what makes it happen. It's very visual. So I really love it. I have a couple of questions about, and thank you for doing this because this was very, very enlightening.
Sure.
When you said don't buy the from Booker don't buy from Booker.
The barcodes.
It's free from what? From
Yeah. So for the barcodes, you can get a free.
not the barcode. No, not the barcode. No. You said something from the broker. We buy the barcode from broker, right?
Yeah, so Bowker is where you buy the ISBNs.
Yeah.
You have to buy it from them. Yeah.
And something else that we have to buy from where?
So you buy the ISBN from Bowker. Bowker will try to sell you the barcode, but you don't have to buy the barcode from them.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, you can get a free barcode from either KDP or from Bookout.
Okay, and the other question was, when you said create an imprint, register it with whom?
That's registered with Bowker as part of your ISBN process.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So one thing I didn't really make clear, so I'll make it clear now. There's a difference between publisher and imprint. So when you're in Bowker, you list yourself as the publisher, but then you can create an imprint, which is basically the name of your brand, basically. And then that is what you include as your imprint, and then that's what goes on the book. And then, but in Amazon KDP, you can list the imprint as the publisher. It's a little confusing. So
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Ildi.
Thank you.
So again, William, really appreciate your presentation because yes, this has been recorded. So we will be sent the link to access the recording. So any other things that we have questions about, we can refer back to his presentation, which is really great. So.
Yes, I'll be putting it on YouTube.
Ah.
That's okay with everybody.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Wow. Well, again, that was amazing. I am so impressed. And to think how young you are, and it's good that you're starting early because you've got a lot ahead of you by the time you finish up through World War II and up to the present or whatever. So good for you. But it's such a rich, amazing story, and it's worth going forward with. So great. Jay had a question.
Yes,
Unmute yourself, Jay.
I'm pushing.
Got it.
Thank you. You're looking, what, 3 books ahead, and I'm worried about what to have for dinner. Just really, I'm amazed at the amount of research and the depth of your enterprise. Really incredible. Very, very impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you know, the mix of future books has changed a little bit over time. There were a couple where I actually planned to set them in the 1400s, but I realized that the stories would work just as well with established characters that people already knew from the earlier books. So I basically moved them back into the 1300s. So stuff like that happens. And so, you know, it's all kind of subject to change. We'll see how far I get, especially the next few years. I'm going to be pretty busy because I'm starting work in October, and then I'm also going to be starting grad school in January. So, you know, the pace may slow down a bit for the next couple of years, but I'm hoping to at least get the 3 books that I've written out, and then, you know, we'll go from there. But thank you.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much again. Anyone else have anything to say to William? But oh, this has been such a treat. We really, really appreciate it. So, so Ildi was maybe had a song. Were you gonna?
No. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been through a lot of problems in my private life, so I'm really not ready for. I know. I am mentally, I am not there, so I'm so sorry. And
Oh.
also, I'm sorry for Dan. You asked me some questions, and I didn't have time yet to answer because I'm in a very bad place right now. I mean, so please excuse me, okay?
Oh, well, good to see you here today. So we really appreciate that. And
Thank you.
everyone, we never know who's going to show because again, it was 178 or something. But this is so
Quality,
great.
not quantity.
Thank
Quality.
you. Thank you. The quality, yes, the cream of the crop.
Yeah. Yes.
I would like to share in the chat area the website address. So if anyone wants to go and see last month's Zoom meeting, from Southwest Manuscripters, where there was, part one with William. It's very good, very interesting. If you were not there, or if you just want to view it, and I'll be doing the same thing and sending out the website address for the link for this meeting. So.
I also just noticed in the chat window, somebody asked if ebooks require an ISBN. The answer to that kind of depends on who you ask, but generally it's a good idea to have one for it. So I would say yes, you do need an ISBN, and especially if you have different formats of your physical book, those also require separate ISBN. So I have, for my book, I have one ISBN for my paperback, and then I have a second one for my ebook. And I think Kindle will sometimes try to tell you don't need one, but I wouldn't listen to them, and I would just get one.
Lots of great information. Does anyone have any announcements? Anything anything to announce? Or Ildi, yes.
Yeah, in all this gloom, what I am going through, there is something really nice. For Father's Day, I wrote a song, and I just sat down here with my guitar, and without this ugly background, I did that for the different projects, the green screen. But I just sat down with my guitar and sang it and put it up on Facebook. And I had, as today, over 80,000 hits, 80,000.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they all love it. They said they were crying while listening. It's a very spiritual about the father who is not there anymore. And so that really perked me up, and that's very beautiful, because it looks like I'm gonna reach the 100,000.
Wow.
Hits,
Wow.
and that's really great. So if you go on the on YouTube, not YouTube, no, yeah, I didn't put it on YouTube. That's stupid, because if I put it on YouTube first and then Facebook, then I can get some money already started, because I had so many things there going. But I forgot. I never even dreamed. I thought that I'm gonna have 20 people seeing it. That's what I thought. 80,000. It's gonna be 100,000 soon. And so go in my Facebook and see, I am sitting with the same nightgown here. Singing my song. The song is in Hungarian, so you won't understand. I speak a little bit in the beginning. There are a picture of my dad, and you can still feel the feel of the song if you want to.
Well, could you do one in English and do it first on YouTube?
I should. No, the noise is gone. I can't. If I put it on YouTube right now, it's not going to go. The numbers are not going to go. But you can see the numbers on the Facebook. It shows over 80,000.
Right. But if you did, put it in English and put it on YouTube and generate us English speakers.
I am doing something. Can I say a couple of things about it? With America's Got Talent, we're doing another project right now, and I wrote a song about the death of about the life of a boy who was dying. His local Howard Thomas. I don't know if you heard of him. He was totally paralyzed from head to toe, yet he raised $200,000 for muscular dystrophy that he had, poor thing, by phoning people up. He couldn't even hold the phone. Somebody had to hold it for him because he was totally paralyzed. And he made over $200,000 just by that before he died. And so he asked me to write a song about his life. And so I did, and I sang it in front of the television and 2,000 people. And he was crying, but he couldn't. So somebody had to take his tears off. And so I just finished a video of that. And that's in English. And so maybe I put it on YouTube soon, but that's, so now I am doing, I stopped doing ILD stuff because, you know, you have to market yourself to a certain point, but at this point, enough ILD, now I am doing things for others. I am serving. And that's what I want to do with the rest of my life, serving. So I do maybe a lot of ILD stuff here and there, just to, you know, funny stuff too. But my main goal is to do some good in this world. And so that's what I am dedicated my life from now on to. Yeah.
Two things. Ildi, what can we do for you?
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Well, just tell me that you guys like me a little bit. That's all that is important, because I feel very low.
Okay, we're lifting you up as you speak.
Well, can I share something very fast with you guys? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so with America's Got Talent, what happened is I prepared myself for a whole year, and I did I sang in front of the judges, the celebrity judges like Simon and Heidi Klum.
Oh yes.
And 2,000 people audience, 3,000 people audience, and so it went fantastic. The people were crazy when I started to do my country song. They were all applauding and screaming and yelling. And so Simon asked me 11 or 12 questions, and they usually ask 1 or 2, what's the name, how old are you? They wanted to know everything about me, even how old, you know, how old I am, why I, what I eat, and who is my husband. And George was in the room, so the camera went on George. And so for the second part of my presentation, I take off my long dress, and I have a mini underneath, and look totally with a big. So the people were crazy. They were applauding, they were yelling, they were screaming, and the audience was so loud that I couldn't hear the beginning of the song. Yet they let me sing the whole song, even if I was off with a rhythm. Normally, they, you know, when something happens, they just X you. So they let me finish even the song, but I knew, and I was dying inside because I knew I was off with the music. And so I didn't make it to the next level. But to me, I mean, the guy, what's his name? You know, he's presenting the, can you see that? This black guy who is presenting.
Yeah.
Okay. So he told me, Ildi, you were a star, you were great, you were wonderful. This was the country dress here. Can you see that?
Nice. Yeah. Pull it back a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And so I was going to go for sure for the next level if I didn't have this stupid technical difficulty. So I'm going to do it next year, but I know now I learned my lesson, because this was about Ildi, about who I am. But they were fascinating. They really, Simon told me, Ildi, we love you. We really love you.
Wow.
Simon, oh my God.
Too many people.
Wow.
So next year, and I am already preparing this song, because I realized that's when I made the switch in my life. I realized that it should not be about yielding. It should be about helping. And this is a great opportunity. It's a platform. And when we have the chance to have a platform in life, we have the duty to give out good, helpful messages.
Mm.
And so I feel that beauty in my shoulders. Duty, not beauty. Duty.
And both.
I want to do this. And so anybody who is supportive around me, thank you so much, because I've got somebody who's very unsupportive. And so I have to fight with every breath. And it's sometimes very difficult when you're constantly.
Congratulations, Ildi. Yeah.
So I have a business question for the Manuscripters. Many years ago, we had a membership list with all the names, addresses, and even on our application, we put yes or no if you want your stuff published. I think it really, since we're home now, maybe we can formulate something that we can have in hand.
Yes, we need a roster again. That they had
Roster.
that when I joined also, and you could opt
Right.
in out if you wanted it published.
Right.
And
Right.
you know, so yes, I
Down
say
the road.
it's just well, when I get back to California, because I have
Okay.
a lot of the, some of you, we can
We
get
can work
together
on it.
and
Yeah.
start working on that would be
Yeah.
great. And I noticed like Robert hasn't been able to join us, and he and I, well, I'm supposed to be the membership director too, but whatever.
Is it
It
okay?
would be nice if we could generate that.
Okay.
It would be nice. So I think we're
Mhm.
all for it. And again, you can opt out of it or not. You know, I know,
Right.
or maybe sign some waiver. You won't use it for spamming people or. So yeah, I say we do that. We work on that. So
All right, when
in
you come home, call me.
well, we're still doing this, and because think of all the time we're saving, not having to go to the library. All that distance and the expense and gas or whatever. But that would be great. Yeah, anyone that wants, and anyone that comes up with ideas too for these Zoom meetings. Next month, Alan's going to appreciate that, Alan, and talk about his new book, and we'll get ideas going forward September on. And again, it's, you know, we'll see if even January is gonna happen, but that's when we're scheduled. So. But again, it's great because the library is working with us, and we've got a lot of makeup dates that they're going to apply to this cancellation.
And Jerry, can we contact you about volunteering to be the 3-minute speaker, or
Yes,
Yeah, that would be
that, or singer, or
any performer?
anything within 3 to 5 minutes that you want to. That would be great. Yes, do that.
Okay.
And then I'll send it on. Thank goodness, Van, you're with us, and
Yeah.
so grateful that too. Oh my God, that was scary with my trying to get all the information out to people. It was so great to have you back. This is super. And again, your facility is being very conscientious, which we so much appreciate, taking very good care of you. Yes, say something. I think you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Did you want to say
Dan,
anything?
say hello.
Say hi, Dan.
Speak to us. You're unmuted. Go ahead. Just
I'm
talk.
gonna wave.
Uh-oh.
Am?
There.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. First of all, I want to apologize for being so late to the conference, but my computer and Microsoft suddenly decided they were going to update my computer.
Oh.
Oh.
Right when I was supposed to have started this thing. So I finally just had to do a hard reboot. And that took about half an hour before I finally got on. So I'm hoping Dan is recording all this so I can watch it later.
Good.
And I hope will make the slideshow available to us so that we can see it slideshow.
Oh yeah.
And it's completed.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I have a suggestion for Will. Is Will still around?
Yeah, I hear.
Did we lose him? There he is. All about this idea. I didn't copyright this, but in the early period of the Native Americans, when the Native Americans still had a real big civilization before Europeans came, they get together and with the Polynesians learn a new ways of navigation, cross over to Australia and invade Australia as a mighty Native American force. How's that for an idea?
That's interesting.
That's something you didn't think of.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. I volunteer at the Point Descending Interpretive Center. At least I did when things were open. And there's an exhibit there which was basically saying that some of the canoe construction techniques used on the West Coast were similar to Polynesian canoe construction techniques.
Oh.
And that particular construction type was only used in this one area. And the other Native American people used different techniques. And so one of the rumors or ideas was that maybe there was some level of contact there that, you know, people didn't really realize. So there's all kinds of interesting historical mysteries which, you know, are intriguing.
Yes. And thanks to Will, and also to Beth for instructing Will in publishing at such an early age. I hope more young people get involved in the same way.
Yeah. Mom
Yes.
gets a good round of applause.
Also, I changed venues for this particular conference. If you'll notice, I'm now in the lobby.
Oh,
Even
Oh.
sleeping now.
Wow.
nice.
Wow.
Very nice.
Unfortunately, it's quite noisy in here. So I try to mute myself because there's so much noise in the hallway. So right now, I shall mute myself. So
Well,
you
thanks
guys
for
can-
joining us. So glad that you could join us. So, yeah. Well, gang,
Jerry?
This Ginger has a question.
Yeah, she does. I was
Ginger, I
so
think-
late and I missed William's talk. And I want to know, how do I get a copy, you know, of your, if you taped it, I want to hear it.
Yeah,
Darn
David
it.
recorded it, so it should be available on YouTube soon.
Yeah, I can, I mean, I'm going to send Van and Jerry, you know, that they'll be the first ones to get the email with the link. But those of you that I have on my email list, I'll send it to you. Why don't I put my, I'll put my email address on here. Like if you can't wait any longer and you say, hey, Dan, you know, please give me a copy, give me a link. It's
That's gonna go public though. You don't want that.
23 at Gmail.
Lambert23@gmail.com is my email address. That's my new email address. I had an AOL account and I missed out on being a delegate for a teachers convention last year because I was using my AOL account and the email never got through to the convention. So I'm since I've been suspicious of AOL ever since. And that's, you know, it's just kind of a very antiquated email. But I wanted to make an announcement. First of all, I wanted to thank Jerry and Alan for being guest speakers at my creative writing class for Cal State LA. That's the first creative writing class I ever taught. So, so thank you. I may be asking all the rest of you guys next time when I teach creative writing to be my guest speakers. But I also want to say there's an anthology called Writing for Life that's just been published from Nervous Ghost Press. And I have a poem that I published in that anthology, but there's lots of great stories and poems from other people in there. So I just want to give you the website address is nervousghostpress.com if you want to go and take a look at it. And they did a reading that was kind of, you know, it was a Zoom meeting similar to this, but where some of the contributors got together, and that's on the website. So if you go to that website, you'll see the link to the Zoom meeting. So
get that info to Van also.
Okay, I will.
Because he'll probably do a newsletter as a follow-up to our Zoom and all too. So
I just wanted to say before we sign off that I'm so glad that Samantha joined us. She's another young person author.
Yes.
I'm not quite clear, Samantha, what you're doing these days or where you're physically located, but if you'd like to be on the mailing list of this group, I know they would really love to have you. So just, I guess, type in the chat or unmute yourself and say so. Well, or not. Okay.
So she just got here. I also want to thank Ginger because she was one of my beta readers and
Oh,
a lot of really great feedback. So Ginger, thank you so much.
good job, folks. Well, again, looking forward, Alan. Next month, August 1st, we will be sending out. It's going to come a little sooner now because this one was pushed back because of the 4th of July holiday. And yeah, if you guys have suggestions also for speakers, presenters, let me know. And we're moving forward. But I'm just so grateful. Dan, thank you so much for putting this together. This is another thing I could not have done. I definitely could not have done. So glad we have all these talented people in the group. We really need you. So, and did you want to say something, Van? Van, did you want to say anything? No, never mind. Oh well. Sorry, he raised his hands.
I could ask him to unmute. No.
Oh no, that's okay.
Okay.
Get it figured, yeah. Well, guys, this has been another. William, cannot thank you enough. Oh my gosh, you've got an amazing, polished presentation that you could just take.
Yes.
Oh.
What? Who said well? Oh. So.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yes, I look forward to the slideshow so I can watch the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, William.
Well, this is so great to have
Yeah,
it
nice.
recorded and have access to it. This has been amazing. Absolutely. So, folks, I guess, again, William, thank you so much. And all you guys, it's great seeing you, those of you that are being seen. And look forward to August 1st, 2 to 4. 4 for my time. Van, I'm in Louisiana, in case you didn't hear. So you knew I was leaving because I'm not getting your mail. So you're not going to get your mail for, anyway.
Jerry, you're in Louisiana?
Oh, yes.
Are you in Louisiana?
I'm outside of Baton Rouge. So
Really?
I'm at my son's home here in Louisiana, visiting with him and my 2 granddaughters. So far, things are going well. Haven't been washed away or rained away or steamed away or whatever.
Are you on the internet? I mean, on email?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank goodness for email. Oh my gosh. And this too, because I would have agonized about missing this if I hadn't had access to Zoom. Fortunately, it's not storming outside. Otherwise, my internet might have been interfered with. But all worked out great. So, and in fact, I'm scheduled to still be here next meeting too, because I'm not scheduled to come home, I think, until the 3rd of August. So again, great to see all you guys. Keep writing, keep smiling, keep breathing, keep safe, healthy.
Keep writing. Yes.
And don't forget us.
Bye.
Thank you so much again. Bye, everyone. Miss you. Mwah. See you. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, have fun, Jerry.
Thank you. Will do. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Love from Jeff. Yes, thank you.
Just hold it.
Yeah, I replaced my name with my email address. So if you want to email me just as a reminder that, I'll send you the link for today's meeting. And there's my better half. And yeah, everyone just keep writing. And that's it. Bye. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves.
Hi, Mo. Sorry we didn't get to say anything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hi, Mo.
Oh, I had my computer was with Geek Squad all week, and I
Oh,
just
no.
and saw your email, and then I came on. But somebody called me while I was driving home.
Oh,
I don't know, might have been Jay.
somebody called you?
Yeah, somebody
Might
called
have
me
been.
about the Zoom meeting because I had forgotten.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that's good. That's good. Okay. I wish I could take credit for that, but I didn't call anyone.
What a modern idea.
Yeah, I know. Actually calling people.
And I
Wow.
did call members about it because I had forgotten. I didn't have it in my calendar. But it's good.
Wow.
It looks as if it went well, and I'll be here
It
next
did.
for the next one.
Yeah, I think we're ironing out any of the bugs. I mean, the only problem I had was with somebody was asking a question. Oh, Ildi, and I realized I couldn't unmute her. I had to ask her to unmute. So maybe they don't, maybe I have my settings so I can't be too draconian and force people to
Actually, the leader, if you're the leader, you do have that power.
Yeah, I am the host, but I'm not sure. Like with Van, it says ask to unmute.
Well,
It doesn't.
it's all new, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't say unmute. But
I have control.
You can unmute everybody if you're the leader,
yeah,
which is not a bad idea because you never know what's going to be in the background.
yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, let's see. Okay, yeah, you're right. I can mute everyone. And it says allow participants to unmute themselves. Oh, I see. Okay.
You want to shut us up right now?
No, that's okay. No, thank you, Mo. Yeah, thank you for that. So, it's just things like that we're ironing out, on Zoom. I'm still using my free account on Zoom, and they announced last month that, they'll let us have 2 hours. Normally it's just 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Thanks.
Okay.
Went well.
Bye. Yes.
Always fumbles. Always.
I know. I'll see you on Facebook.
Okay.
I really. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you
are you?
don't have neons around your head. Now you've got shining lights.
I know.
Beforehand.
Too much. I got this shiny thing on my head. See it?
Please
Coming in through the window.
Please send me the links to the video and Will's thing if he lets you have it as soon as you can.
I don't have it yet, but I'll send you the link to the video.
Yeah.
And and I even have the chat. The chat room.
Well, Will's PowerPoint was really informative, but there's no way I can take that down.
I know.
If you can share that also.
I'll ask
Thank you
Will.
very much.
Yeah, it was a really good PowerPoint presentation, very professional. And his book.
I like it. And it had good information.
Yeah, I didn't get, I was going to mention Harry Turtledove. It kind of reminds me of Harry Turtledove. I mean, it's a completely original concept from William, but it reminds me a little bit of Dune with all the, political backstabbing and all the stuff.
Yeah.
The characters.
But in a very medieval way.
In a medieval way, yes.
Yeah. That's why I suggested the Indian thing, the Native American before the Europeans got here.
Yes.
Amazing network. Trade, civilization. All they needed was navigational skill. And the Polynesians already had that for thousands of years.
Oh, yes.
In
Fascinating.
Once you got that, on to Australia.
On to Australia, yeah. And just looking at Will's illustrations, it's it reminds me, it's this really rich kind of royal family, and they are indigenous people. They don't look like I do. They're brown-skinned people.
His illustrations reminded me of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
definitely.
I'm signing off for now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Van. Good to see you.